Today in New Orleans, they got a lot tougher on the holdouts.
Police department, everyone home!
Not only the flooded areas, but New Orleans' driest and wealthiest neighborhoods, too.
Police department!
The police and National Guard going street by street, house to house.
We need to make sure, too, that whenever we knock on the doors, people refuse to leave, we need to make note, call.
At the same time, the question has to be asked, are they planting seeds in people's minds?
Sometimes entering open houses with guns drawn and instructions to disarm anyone inside.
You say guns will be taken? No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
That happened today in this wealthy neighborhood where homeowners had armed themselves to protect their mansions. Residents were handcuffed on the ground.
They were a little...
The police and guard troops, it is an uncomfortable job to do this in an American city.
Well, I don't want you in here. We're not going to do that. I don't want you in here, period. But there's a mandatory evacuation. I know all about it. All of a sudden, they were banging on the front door, the side door, and the back door. They said, let us in.
Patty tried to explain. She was on dry land, she had plenty of food and water, and didn't want to abandon her dogs. But it didn't matter. If you see 6 or 8 police that look like linebackers pushing you in a corner, you're in shock. I'd say, look at all my food. I got plenty of food. They kept pushing me back, and ended up like this.
Well, the Chicago's protests were to no avail. They moved her out of there.
We've acted.
Evacuees are flooding this embarkation center. Now, despite the large number of people and pets, things are running very smoothly. Now, this efficiency can be attributed to a technology solution brought on by Radiant RFID. Which uses RFID wristbands and RFID portals. The jurisdiction is able to get an accurate manifest on every single person getting on the bus just by walking them through this simple portal. Pets and critical medical equipment belonging to the evacuees pass through this RFID portal and are immediately added to the manifest as well. Bus loading personnel no longer need to scan each person on the bus with a barcode system like this one, a process that can be consuming when time is of the essence.
All right, guys.
Well, I can't address the FEMA camps, but I can address something very closely related, and that is the restriction of travel. And in my research, which really began with looking into toll transponders being used on cars and has now expanded into looking at how tolls are being very specifically used together with information or with planning for a potential epidemic to actually create choke points, to create borders of states where there would literally be no leaving a state. A state could be locked down, where we may actually be moving to a plan in the future where crossing the border from, say, New Hampshire into Massachusetts would be akin today to crossing the border from America to Canada.
FEMA has been given the authority to declare martial law wherever they are deployed. And that is a very powerful authority, in that, as you should know, when martial law is declared, that your constitutional rights are dismissed.
So that's really what has me very concerned. You don't really need to round people up in FEMA camps if you can simply lock them down. I'll give you one example. The city of Cambridge, I recently interviewed on my radio program a city council member from Cambridge who had given back money that was used to install video cameras, federal money for video cameras, at all the points of egress from Cambridge. And she said, why do we need this? And the answer was, well, in the event that we have to shut Cambridge down and keep people in, we need to know what the routes are out of the city so we can set up checkpoints and prevent.
New questions tonight about an Army combat brigade being trained to deal with civil disturbances in the United States. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 generally prohibits federal uniformed services from carrying out domestic law enforcement duties, except in cases expressly authorized by the Constitution or an act of Congress. Critics say the brigade's training goes against one of the founding principles of our country, separation of military and civilian government.
They've spent 30 months on the streets of Baghdad. Now the 1st Brigade Combat Team of the Army's 3rd Infantry Division is back in the USA. The Army Times reporting, quote, they may be called upon to help with civil unrest and crowd control or to deal with potentially horrific scenarios, end quote.
May be called upon to help with civil unrest and crowd control.
The question arises why? And isn't that what the National Guard does?
Infantry Brigade is designed to engage an enemy with maximum effective force and destroy it. That's not the sort of thing anybody wants to see in the streets of the United States.
Almost 5,000 strong, the brigade is based at Fort Stewart, Georgia, under the first President Bush to contain the 1992 riots in Los Angeles, under President Lyndon Johnson in response to Detroit's 1967 riots, and in the grips of a depression by President Herbert Hoover to contain Army veterans demanding their bonuses.
Reagan was elected to the presidency. He installed Louis Giuffrida as head of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Giuffrida was an old cold warrior from Reagan's California days whose specialty was suppression of unrest and dissent. Giuffrida, North, and George Bush began to turn FEMA into an instrument of domestic anti-terrorism.
You're dealing with a group of people in the Reagan administration who equated political dissent with treason, and who cannot differentiate between emergency procedures, which I think everyone agrees are necessary, and suppressing political dissent. And with North and Poindexter and Casey, you had a group of people who saw Americans who disagree with them as the enemy.
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster? Mr. Chairman.
I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir.
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was,
may I most respectfully request that that matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, I'm certain arrangements can be made for an executive session.
And tragically, the only member who got close was Jack Brooks, and he was stopped by the chairman.
Congress shall now vote for approval of H.R. 8791, the Homeland Terrorism Preparedness Bill. Said bill requests emergency response funding up to and including, this section is classified, dollars to prepare for a national level terrorist attack and or attack from classified. Funding for first responder personnel and vehicles would be doubled if said attack leads to more than 80% of national population being affected by classified. This funding shall commence in conjunction with the first attack on classified or the first large-scale outbreak of classified, dependent upon which comes first. Civilian and military units shall be trained in containment and combat of classified, including irradiated classified with possibility of classified airborne, classified flesh-eating, classified, and or all of the above in such event as classified spewing, classified escape, are released or otherwise become uncontrollable. Air Force units may also be directed to combat said classified due to their enormous size and otherworldly strengths. Should event occur in urban areas, that's classified, far surpassing our darkest nightmares. Should casualties exceed classified body disposal actions, shall be halted and associated resources shall be reallocated to classified underground, classified protected birthing centers. A new Bill of Rights shall be drafted and approved by classified. Having now reviewed the bill, I ask you to please cast your votes.